Serena Williams, I think, are the only two women that are in the top 50. And the pay I have some figures. I've collected these numbers over the years. I don't have them in front of me, but it's absurd, the pay discrepancy between men and women. And you also just have to look at on TV, the visibility of women's sports is also almost, there is none.
Right.
I mean, NBC Sports locally here in the Bay Area does not broadcast a single female sport. So,
wow.
And it's because the big sports, football and baseball, like those are still all male. Like, it's something my daughter had asked about at a young age of, why are there no women playing football? And it's, because there's no, they do play football, but it's just this, it's a cycle of, again, that cycle you were talking about with the photographers and then getting sponsorship and whatever. There's no pipeline for the most part, I think. And that's what Title IX was trying to create, was a pipeline for women in sports. And I think there still is a long way to go in terms of that pipeline of getting girls involved with sports early and then creating opportunities for them to continue that through their adolescence and into adulthood.
Did that moment in college, was that impactful for you in any way? The fact that your sport was cut and like knowing that there was kind of a gender bias policy in play, like did that affect you in any way? Was there like a sense of any heartbreak that your sport was cut? Do you remember what that was like?
Honestly, I think we were always a club sport.
Okay.
I think that I don't remember a time that we were not, that we were actually official. So I don't know. It was the very beginning of that sport at Brown. So I think that I was just dumb and naive and also just used to, I think our generation was just used to getting, the bottom of the barrel. Yeah. I mean, I think we kind of were like, oh, that's just the way it goes kind of thing. I swam at Brown also. So I swam for 2 years and that was obviously a full-fledged sport, and we were well ranked, I think, within the Ivy League and NC2A. We were legit. I think water polo, because it was a quote unquote club sport, it was, obviously it was just like, oh, isn't that cute? Like, who's going to coach us? I mean, that was the big thing, is who's going to coach us? We always had a guy from the men's water polo team as our coach,
right?
Which was actually great. Chad Nelson, who's now the CEO of Surf Rider, was my coach.
Wow!
So that's exciting.
Idea. I didn't connect those two names.
Yeah, wow. So that's a cool little piece of trivia, and he was great. He was great. They were great coaches. But for me, I was a swimmer my whole life, but the water polo thing was so new and exciting that just the opportunity to do it at all was like. This is awesome. Like, why haven't I been doing this my whole life? Like, this is why thank God I learned how to swim so I can do this.
What inspired you then to, look at something like Mavericks or, Ocean Beach and just say, hey, you know what? I want to swim out there and shoot some photographs. Like, where did that come from? Like, what, let's take it back a little bit to your, humble beginnings in shooting in the water.
My humble beginnings in the water really just began swimming back in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in an indoor
I never
pool.
knew you were an East Coaster.
Oh, yeah. That's not even the coast.
Oh, yeah. Actually,
I like to call it the coast, but my husband's like, it's not the East Coast. Pittsburgh is like nowhere near the coast. But that lifetime of swimming competitively definitely gave me the confidence that I approached the ocean with. And then I also, every summer, my parents are both from Southern California. So every summer I would go to California, and I would go to Japanese school and just soak up my mom's Japanese heritage and family. And then at the end of the summer, my dad's parents would rent a beach house in Capistrano Beach, California. So I was exposed to the ocean since I was a baby, but just for those 2 weeks every summer. And I learned my family didn't have any surfers. They had body surfers. So I learned how to body surf. And I really always wanted to learn how to surf, but was just too embarrassed to ask anyone, or, didn't know who to ask. But again, was always confident in swimming out there.
Right.
So when I,
did you feel like that was part of a gender kind of gap?
For sure. 100%. Yeah. I mean, it was all boys that were surfing, and, I was just my dad was like, well, let's just go ask those boys. And I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? Don't embarrass me. So I first learned to surf when I had graduated, or it was the summer before my final semester at Brown. And I was doing an internship in San Jose. And I had a friend from the water polo team, actually, Jody Budge, who lived in Santa. Do you remember her?
Yes, of course. Jody Budge, she was in San Clemente, right?
She's in Laguna Beach. Yeah,
right.
She's from Laguna,
right?
And she taught me how to surf in Santa Cruz. And then I lived in Japan for a while after I graduated. I taught English in Japan, and that's when I had my first real money. And I had in my back in my mind that I wanted to try this water photography thing. And the only reason I knew about that is because when I was in high school, I had seen a documentary with Aaron Chang, the water photographer.
Yeah, of course.
And I had never, this is before social media or anything. So, and I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I was like, what? I was like, wait, what? You can surf, swim in the waves with a camera and take photos. Cause I was into photography at the time. And so I was just like, that's it. Like, that's what I'm supposed to do. And so when I was in Japan, I saved up enough money. This is also pre-GoPro, pre-iPhone.
Right.
So, so I saved up money for a camera and found a surf photographer in Japan that I asked if I could shadow and, to mentor me. And so I tagged along with him to some shoots outside of Tokyo in Niigata, this island off of Tokyo. And then I was teaching English in the southern part of Japan, where there's another island off of the south of Japan that I'm not going to name that has great surfing. And so I spent a lot of time there.
What was your first water housing that you used, or what was the first cameras like?
Yeah, it was a Canon EOS 1NRS. It was a film camera. It was shot 24 or 36 frames, period.
Wow.
And the housing actually was a guy the Kim Komodo, who's a really famous Japanese water photographer. It was the guy that made his housings. It was a DIV housing. I don't know. It's this, they're all handmade. They're all custom made. So I sank like $7,000 into this camera and water housing before I had ever even shot a frame in the water, just because I knew that this was what I was supposed to do.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it was a calling immediately.
It was it was calling. And as soon as I brought it out on this island off of Kagoshima, it was like, okay, it's on, let's do this. And so after I had taught English, I saved up enough money to travel through Asia, and Indonesia was on the end of that trip.
Yes.
And so I shot that whole trip. I, planned the trip based on surf locations and came back to the States, determined to become a water photographer. But, again, at the time, there were no opportunities. It was magazines only, and I was not part of the club.
Right.
And there was no money. I didn't have any money saved up to float me. I couldn't drive an Uber at night or something. There's so many other ways to do it these days, which is amazing.
Yeah.
But we just didn't have that back then.
The gig economy.
Yeah. The gig economy. On top of that, also, which is related to the next, part of this interview, is I also was bipolar. And I, back then, you could not get health insurance if you had a pre-existing condition.
Oh, my God.
The only way that you could get health insurance is if you had a job at a company. And so I always, my whole adult life, had to have a job at a company. I could never go freelance because you simply could not get insurance, period.
Wow.
So I just went the film route. And so I was able to always get a job in film production and at film production companies. And so it just became this dream that I would, pursue on the weekends and here and there. And it wasn't until I took this trip across the Americas. I quit my job at the LA Times. Well, it's actually...
That's the last time I saw you, actually.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago now. Yeah.
I mean, I kept coming back to it. Like when I went to graduate school at Berkeley, I was like, okay, every single film, every story I'm going to do is going to get me in the water, shooting in the water. Like if I'm paying for this, like I'm going to get myself in the water. And then, and I did. And my thesis film was about surfers in Puerto Rico who stopped the Army Corps of Engineers from dumping dredge on their surf reef. And then when I went to the LA Times, I also just made a beeline to everyone who did ocean films and water sports. And I was like, I'm your gal. I can shoot in the water. Like, send me out, And that really worked well for me. I was able to, that did get me in the water. And then it was on this road trip that I was able to really get in the water all the time. And then I just got lucky and got this job teaching at San Francisco State, which placed me right back in this, playground, which is Ocean Beach, which I had known 20 years ago when I was in graduate school or right before I moved here, in like 2000, I moved here. So it got me back to this whole community that I had gotten to know in 2000. But 2000 is when I first started going in at Ocean Beach. Your original question is why I went out there, and it was another woman that gave me the courage to go out there. There's a body surfer named Judith Sheridan, who is a local legend here, and she used to body surf the biggest days at Ocean Beach, and she's body surfed at Mavericks. And I was not a very good surfer. I'm still not a very good surfer, but I was really not a good surfer back then, but I knew I could swim out there. So my boyfriend at the time was surfing. It was one of the first times I had been to Ocean Beach, and it was a big day, and I knew I couldn't go out and surf. I was like, you go. But I sat, typical girlfriend, hopefully not typical anymore, girlfriend he in the parking lot. But he had
you still see it now.
Manny the camera. I know. But anyhow, he had some binoculars, and so I put on these. I was looking because I saw this head bobbing around. I saw somebody body surfing, and I got the binoculars, and I was like, "That's a woman that's body surfing." And I think that was the extra little thing that I needed to be like, okay, there's another woman out there. I can go out there too. And so I swam out and was like, hi, and what's your name? And she really, in that one session, she just told me and taught me everything I needed to know about how to survive beatdowns at Ocean Beach. And so it just kind of took off from
and
there.
All the stuff that happens there.
Yeah. So it kind of took off from there. And then it really wasn't until I came back. And it was actually when I was pregnant, I had just had my daughter, was when this big swell on Martin Luther King Day, MLK Day, what was the day? 2010. Anyhow, this big swell came to Ocean Beach, and I just remember looking at it and being so bummed that I couldn't go out. I was totally then I really, really was out of shape. I had just had a baby, and there was like no chance I was going to go out. But I just looked at it and I was like, I know I can get out there. I know I can. And so that kind of became my quest. And as soon as I was able to try, I did. And I've been going back ever since. Can't hold me back. I bought that first camera when I was 22. And I was shooting in big waves in Indonesia, in 1997 is when I started shooting, really, doing water photography. But before I went to Japan, I worked as Demi Moore's assistant for this movie called The Juror, that was a pretty awesome job.
I want to go back to the story of Judith Sheridan, because I find that in surfing